In 1924, Canadian lumberjack Albert Ostman hiked into the Toba Inlet, which is located on the coast of British Columbia, opposite Vancouver Island. Approximately 1 week later, he would emerge from the woods with one of the most unbelievable Bigfoot encounters of the 20th century. Simply stated, Ostman would allege to be taken by a Sasquatch and live with a family of Bigfoots for 6 days. In this episode, we will dive into this unbelievable story and also discuss the question, could Bigfoot be real? In 1924, Albert Ostman headed out for a vacation in the woods, hoping to find a lost gold mine. At the time, British Columbia was famous for its old gold mines, and Toba Inlet was rumored to have a famous one. Ostman took a steamship to Toba Inlet, and once there decided to hire a guide to assist him. The guide was an older Indian, a man familiar with the land and the wildlife. In addition, the guide discussed the legends of the gold mines. In particular, one man who had struck it rich went to visit a hidden one but never returned. Locals said he was killed by Sasquatches. Ostman was not familiar with Sasquatches and would ask the old Indian what they were, to which he informed him they were big people with hair all over their bodies that lived in the mountains. The Indian would recall his uncle had spotted one. Ostman was skeptical, and the Indian told him they exist, although there are not many. After Ostman was guided to his campsite, the old Indian would soon depart with plans for either him or a friend to come back and get Albert in a couple weeks. Albert soon got to work hiking and looking for trails that could potentially lead to one of the fabled gold mines. Alone now, Ostman was an experienced outdoorsman who was familiar with how to live off the land and survive in the wilderness. According to Ostman, he hiked and prospected for a few days in the area, and then the strangeness began. One morning he woke up to his campsite, and something in the woods had descended on his camp, disturbing it. He believed initially it was a porcupine. The event persisted again the next day, as his sack was emptied out and also his pancake mix had been taken. It's important to note Ostman was experienced with this type of thing. He had bears destroy his campground many times and knew, based on the evidence, it wasn't a bear. He also looked for tracks, but interestingly, couldn't find them. That day he prospected, and after returning that night, Ostman was fed up and decided it was time to fend off the animal or whatever it was. While the situation was strange, Ostman didn't think anything supernatural was happening. Of course, Ostman had heard the stories of the ape men from the old Indian, but personally, since he didn't or hadn't ever seen one, he really didn't believe it. That third night, though, he decided he would catch the culprit. Ostman climbed into his sleeping bag, fully clothed, prepared to jump out once the vandal came into his camp, and was ready to stay awake all night. However, due to lingering fatigue, Ostman fell asleep. Then sometime around 12 to 2 a.m., Albert was taken. According to Albert,
I was awakened by something picking me up. I was half asleep, and at first I did not remember where I was. As I began to get my wits together, I remembered I was on this prospecting trip and in my sleeping bag. My first thought was, it must be a snow slide, but there was no snow around my camp. Then it felt like I was tossed on horseback, but I could feel whoever it was walking.
His sleeping bag, Ostman was carried by something, and being extremely uncomfortable, tried to communicate with it to drop him. He felt himself going up and down steep hills, and being in the bag, had difficulty breathing. At one point, the Bigfoot grabbed him and just started dragging him across the ground. All in all, the Bigfoot carried him for around 3 hours. Then the Sasquatch dropped him on the ground. Ostman began rolling down a hill, eventually stopping. It was still dark out, and Ostman flung his head out to finally get some air. His legs were numb, and he was unable to stand. In the darkness, he could see the shadows of 4 humanoids, but couldn't make out any details. Then Ostman was finally able to get up. Looking at his watch, it was 4:25 a.m., and he stated to the Bigfoots, "What do you want with me?" The mysterious humanoids continued chattering with one another, and soon Albert could see them as the sun rose. There were 4 Sasquatches, 2 adults and 2 children. The children seemed scared of him, while the woman wasn't happy Albert was there. Soon the Bigfoots went about their business, and Albert, still in very bad shape, contemplated what to do. The issue was that he wasn't entirely sure where he was. He could see he was in a valley, but not only was he confused how to get out, he didn't even know which way to go. As such, he decided to rest the first day, which he later described as being uneventful. He did have an empty snuff box, which he eventually rolled over to the young Sasquatch boy. The Bigfoot would play with it for some time. The next morning, Albert woke up and decided even though he didn't know where he was, it was time to leave. Albert got up, packed a few things, knowing he had limited food as well, and began heading toward the gap. As he did, the dad Bigfoot got up and stood in front of him, threatening to push him back. Albert pointed toward the opening, but the large Bigfoot vocalized something that sounded like soka soka and signaled for Albert to sit down. Albert debated shooting the beast with his rifle, but reasoned he had only 6 shells. Furthermore, he didn't think the bullets would be able to significantly harm it, since it was so giant, being at least 8 feet tall and probably weighing 800 to 1,000 pounds. Albert was forced to stay, but then began to think, how could he escape? He reasoned that the best way to do this was going to be with one of his snuff boxes he had. Snuff is a smokeless tobacco that people sniffed in the 19th and early 20th century. Albert recalled a story he heard of a man saving himself from a bull by blinding it with snuff. Albert reasoned if he gave it to the boy Bigfoot might pass it on to the father. Albert went to bed that night continuing to think of ways to escape. The next day he woke up, ate some food, and grabbed some water from the nearby creek. He would continue to observe the Bigfoots and watch them for several days. Each day, they seemed to warm up to him more. On day 6, Albert would have more interaction with the Bigfoot family, making them what he called a dipper, which Albert demonstrated to the family how he used to drink water from the river. The Sasquatches were amused, and Albert made several for them. In exchange, the Bigfoots would give him several grains and fruit, which were sweet. In general, they seemed to be warming up to their hostage, although the feeling wasn't mutual. Albert still wanted to leave. He had been there for 6 days, was running out of food, and was very dirty. His idea on escaping hadn't changed. Get the big Sasquatch to eat a can of snuff. That would incapacitate him, or possibly kill him. Interestingly, Albert didn't really want to kill any of them, though. He continued pondering around the Bigfoots, and concluded he just needed to get the man to take the snuff. The girl and the boy were friendly enough, and the woman, although large, was meek and appeared gentle. Albert believed the boy was between 11 to 18 years old, and he estimated it to be around 7 feet tall, probably weighing around 300 pounds. The next day, Albert woke up, and the older male Sasquatch finally seemed to become interested in the snuff. Watched as Albert pinched some snuff and sniffed a little bit up his nose. The Bigfoot didn't think snuff should be used so sparingly, though. It picked up his entire can and dumped the entire thing in its mouth in one gulp. Soon the Bigfoot became very sick, grabbing the coffee grinds from Albert and eating them in an attempt to ease the pain. This didn't work, though, and the Sasquatch fell to the ground, holding its stomach in pain. Albert began to pack up, and soon the boy Bigfoot noticed. It ran over and told the female, who started to chase Albert. Albert grabbed his gun and fired just above her head, apparently scaring her with the noise, and she stopped the pursuit. Albert continued traveling, running down the mountainside and getting away as far as possible. Eventually, he spotted Mount Baker and knew where he was. He reached the bottom of a canyon in time and settled in that night for some sleep. He felt pretty confident he was away and safe, and even made a fire. Albert woke up the next morning extremely sick from his meal and battling tired legs and exhaustion, managed to climb up the nearby mountain in 6 hours, albeit he had to rest every few hundred yards. He then headed back down the other side and eventually ran into some loggers. Albert didn't mention the Sasquatches and only told them he was a prospector who was lost. The group took in Albert and helped him with first aid, clean clothes, food, and getting him back. What can we make of Albert's story? It took more than 30 years for Albert to recall his experience. In the 1950s, when Bigfoot stories began popping up in the Pacific Northwest, Albert would tell his story. His reasoning was that other people had seen these creatures, and he wanted to share his experience too. Should we believe his story though? It certainly sounds far-fetched, but Albert seemed to point out things that many witnesses have stated. His descriptions were very similar to what people have reported for years. Still, some of the story appears to have inconsistent parts. For example, why was the Bigfoot so far from where its family was? In Albert's account, he mentioned the family appeared to be meat eaters, but seemed to be temporarily stopping over in the area because of the food that was growing there. If the Bigfoot did need food, it seems like a long way for it to travel to grab him. In addition, once the male Bigfoot was feeling better, it should have been able to catch Albert. One other thing to point out is that Albert often seems to suggest that the Sasquatches are not intelligent. It seems that a species, if it exists, would have to be highly intelligent to evade detection for so long. This raises the question around whether Bigfoot could be real. According to the Bigfoot Research Organization, they've received over 75,000 eyewitness accounts of people alleging to see the beast. It's important to point out, though, that the organization only considers around 5,000 credible, and despite what many critics say, the stories are scrutinized for inconsistencies and also factor in things such as a person's perception of Bigfoot before he or she alleges to see one. Compared to UFOs and paranormal activity, public support for Bigfoot being real remains quite low, though. According to a civic science survey, only around 11% of the US adult population believe Bigfoot is a real creature. In contrast, a July 2023 Ipsos poll found 42% of Americans believe in UFOs. Similar results were found for ghosts, according to a YouGov study in 2021. It's important to point out here how far belief in UFO and ETs has came the last 40 years. While there are many reasons for this, one big contributing factor is how much trust in the government has eroded over time. Why do so many doubt the existence of Sasquatch then? First reason is that many state if this species did exist, we would have found a body by now, or the species. The second reason is that many allege we have explored pretty much everywhere on Earth, excluding the oceans and the poles, and we still haven't found the creature. Both of these theories have weaknesses, though. The first is that it's reasonable to assume that Sasquatches, if they exist and when they pass on, smell horribly. In many Bigfoot encounters, individuals recall putrid smell, and it stands to reason when a Bigfoot passes, other Sasquatches are able to locate it quickly and dispose of the body. One other thing to note around the body theory is that we should fully expect this species to dominate even the most skilled hunters in the woods, and probably a hunter is not able to kill one. The second reason often quoted is around exploration. Critics often state, if Bigfoot exists, where is it? In response to this critique, it must be pointed out just how vast and open the woods are and how big the areas are in this country still alone that we have not explored. For example, the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness area in Idaho is 2.5 million square acres. To put that in perspective, it's about twice the size of Delaware and has no roads going through it. In addition to this, there's much historical precedent for scientists stating a species is extinct, only to discover later that they are living. In 1938, the coelacanth, a fish that had been said to be extinct for 60 million years, was discovered in South Africa. Like this fish, rumors of a dragon existed and were ridiculed until the Komodo dragon was discovered in 1912. Even the gorilla, once thought to be folklore, was not confirmed until the late 19th century. All this said, will we see a change in the perspective of Bigfoot by the general public? It seems unlikely to happen anytime soon. With AI and incredible costumes, the public has less faith than ever in any of these sightings. Coming back to the Albert Ostman story, it could be the case Bigfoot was a species that did exist but went extinct. This is evidenced by the number of Native Americans who have told stories about the creatures. Many Bigfoot researchers will point out all the evidence they have collected, such as castings and vocalizations. Many of these appear to be legit and unexplainable. Even the famous Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film has never been debunked. In time, maybe we will get that smoking gun evidence, but we need, until then, the Bigfoot community to continue